ABC Mouse is the full.
The US president has issued new remarks that raise questions about his relationship with Russia's president. Donald Trump said Vladimir Putin is ruining Russia by continuing its war on Ukraine, adding that he'd consider new sanctions if Moscow doesn't try to make the deal. CNN's Fred Python has the details for us.
Just hours after President Donald Trump's inauguration, Kremlin-controlled TV already poking fun at the new U.S. leader and Trump's pledge to end the war in Ukraine on day one. In the U.S., they call the expression "stop the war in 24 hours" a bright example of Trump's hyperbole, Post says. But Trump himself says he intends to keep his promise and that his new approval is soon ahead. The tone on state TV very different than before the inauguration, like in December, when Trump had criticized the Biden administration's decision to allow Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied ATACMS missiles to fire into Russia.
Absolutely sensational.
More absolutely sensational news, the anchor said then. Donald Trump condemned the use of ATACMS for attacks on the territory of Russia. Shortly after taking office, President Trump, who claims to have good relations with Putin, appeared surprisingly critical of the Russian leader.
Zelensky wants to make a deal. I don't know, Putin does, he might not. He should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia. I'm not making a deal. I think Russia's going to be in big trouble.
But Putin unfazed, showing who he considers to be his most important ally and friend, Chinese leader Xi Jinping, even after Xi took the rare step of calling Trump shortly before the inauguration. Xi and Putin now making clear, virtual summit, China and Russia will stand together no matter what Trump does. These connections are self-sufficient and independent of domestic political factors and the current global situation, Putin said. year, I am ready, together with you, to elevate Chinese-Russian relations to a new level, she added, to counter external uncertainties by preserving stability and resilience in Chinese-Russian relations. As Ukraine continues to lose ground in many sectors of the vast front line, Ukraine's president, speaking at the Davos Economic Forum, appeared concerned about whether Kiev's allies can achieve what Ukraine would consider a just peace. If there are weak guarantees, uncertain, only words, then you will only get words from Russia, and you will come back with war again. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Berlin.
Donald Trump had insisted that if re-elected, he would end Russia's war in Ukraine on his first day. Well, that deadline has come and gone, and the war rages on unchecked.
And the US president is critical of Russian President Vladimir Putin for failing to make a deal to end the fighting. CNN was reports that Ukrainians are desperate for it to end soon.
Neither Ukraine or Russia got a mention here. But hours later, Trump gave reporters his most stark criticism yet of Putin's war.
He should make a deal. I think it's destroying Russia by not making a deal. I think Russia's gonna be in big trouble. You take a look at their economy, you take a look at the inflation projection. So I would hope. I got along with him great, and I would hope he wants to make a deal.
He said Europe should almost double its defense spend, and he would meet Putin soon. Trump's words, long awaited and welcomed here.
you doing? Oh, for yourself? Let me see it when it's finished, please.
Because you're just the cutest little sperm from all of history and humanity. Oh my goodness gracious.
In central Kiev, so all the talk of peace deals, the conditions for it, negotiations, somewhat distant and theoretical from the real dangers people in Kiev here go through every day, the sirens sounding so frequently, and this vast sea of loss. Clearly, so many Ukrainians desperate for peace, but also to see the sacrifice that's made yield some kind of future they can be happy with. As the sea of grief spreads to fresh grass.
Oh my goodness gracious, you're just a fuzzy little rumpy.
Nazar is just back from the recruitment office. Можливо, навіть найближчих днів. Він все ж таки, perhaps even in the coming days, he says Trump should give more information about what he plans to do. But I don't believe in Trump alone. This is such a war that it will not be ended by the actions of one person. Yulia is here to remember her son, Yevgeny, who died fighting 2 years ago.
Ну, я думаю, що
Maybe we'll be given more planes and weapons to win faster, she says. We really hope so. We have great hope that he will help Ukraine. Ukraine's president delivering a gentle dressing down of his European allies in front of their elite in Switzerland.
European leaders should remember these battles involving North Korean soldiers are now happening in places geographically closer to Davos than to Pyongyang.
As his forces fought to hold back Russia here in Toretsk, he reminded the European elite some of its governments were less powerful now than TikTok's algorithm. Trump baiting Putin, Zelensky baiting Europe. Day one in change of a less expected sort is here. There is extraordinary hope voiced by people here in Ukraine, and you get the sense that underneath it they perhaps feel they have little choice but to try and believe that Donald Trump, with the stark words he had to say frankly about the Kremlin's choices in this war, genuinely wants to put pressure on Moscow. But they also know too that their situation on the front line is deteriorating, frankly daily, incrementally yes, but in a steady way that suggests the curve of this war is working not in Kiev's favour. And I think it is that clock that is ticking in the background that will dictate so many of the choices ahead. But it was remarkable to hear Donald Trump exert rhetorically so much pressure on the Kremlin head in his first comments since coming to office. Lee Payton Walsh, CNN, Kiev, Ukraine.
Most homeowners have it somewhere in their house. It's that one bad window. It's
this morning, President Donald Trump sent out a Truth Social post to Vladimir Putin demanding that he make a deal to end the war in Ukraine, or else. Now, the or else, according to Donald Trump, would be taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on Russia. So, it's worth reading exactly what Trump wrote on Truth Social to kind of get a better understanding of how he is approaching this issue. Because remember, one of his big promises was that he was going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. Now, obviously, that didn't happen on day one. Obviously, after he made that statement, he just kind of backtracked a little bit to lower expectations, which I think was the right thing to do. There's no way you can end a big war like this on day one. But nonetheless, this is what he posted on Truth Social, saying that I'm not looking to hurt Russia. I love the Russian people and always had a very good relationship with President Putin. And this, despite the radical left's Russia, Russia, Russia hoax. We must never forget that Russia helped us win the Second World War, losing almost 60 million lives in the process. Okay, Soviet-era Russia absolutely did help beat the Nazis. I mean, they played a pivotal role in beating the Nazis, so he's right about that. But we'll take a moment to note that we're not sure where he got that 60 million figure from, because according to the National World War II Museum, the Soviet Union lost 24 million soldiers and civilians in World War II. whatever. That's just a side note, but let's get to the rest of the statement. He says, all that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing, and President Putin a very big favor. Settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse. If we don't make a deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. No more lives should be lost. So obviously, the Biden administration has already implemented economic sanctions against Russia for their role in invading Ukraine. We're going to revisit that and kind of compare that to what Trump is suggesting here. But this messaging is interesting because obviously the media's coverage of Donald Trump and his relationship with Vladimir Putin has been pretty critical. He's been very friendly with Putin, and so obviously that led to accusations that Russia might have colluded with Donald Trump to help him win the 2016 presidential election. There hasn't been any, evidence of that. But lately, Trump's tone has changed a little bit. For instance, yesterday, he stated that Putin should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal. And he also said he can't be thrilled. He's not doing so well. I mean, he's grinding it out. It's not making him look very good. I think he would be well off to end that war. So look, the good news is Trump is very clearly motivated to end this war, and he is issuing threats against Vladimir Putin, and I think that's the right person to issue threats against. Yesterday, Trump also said that he believes Volodymyr Zelensky is more open to making a deal, but he doesn't think or doesn't know whether Vladimir Putin is. When Trump was inaugurated, Putin stated that he was open to dialogue with the United States about the war, saying that I want to emphasize that its goal should not be a brief truce, but a lasting peace based on respect for the legitimate interests of all people, which is rich coming from the guy who invaded Ukraine. But Trump has infamously claimed that he could end the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours. He has already missed that deadline, but he has admitted that a deal will take a little bit of time. Let's take a look at that.
The real conversations will start on the 20th. But we had a really good conversation, and I think we're going to be in a good place in the Middle East. I think the Middle East is going to be in a good place. I think what's going to be difficult is going to be the Russia-Ukraine situation. I don't think they should have allowed missiles to be shot into Russia. I think that was a bad thing, and that brought the Koreans in, North Korea.
It does seem that Trump wants to get a deal, get a deal through as quickly as possible, so that's good news. But it's worth noting that Trump is pushing for peace because he's responding to the will of his base, his voters. His voters no longer want to fund the war in Ukraine. They no longer want to have any U.S. involvement in that conflict, and they want it to end. And so he made that promise to his voters, and it's clear that he intends on keeping that promise. Now, whether or not his strategy here is going to work remains to be seen. But I do want to just show you this clip from last year because I think it's still relevant today. Take a look at this.
The young men that I have been talking to in particular, they don't hate Kamala Harris. They actually like her in certain ways. They just say they think the world was better and safer under Donald Trump. The economy was healthier. One other thing that keeps coming up too, that you don't hear a lot about in the national media, Dana, is a lot of young men are worried about global conflict because they are of draft age. That comes up over and over and over again in conversations that I've been having over the last few weeks.
I thought that insight from Peter Hamby was so valuable. That conversation took place during the election cycle, and I really wish Democrats listened, but they didn't. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been listening to his supporters. And when he says he's going to carry out a promise, sometimes he doesn't follow through. But in this case, to me, it's clear that he does want to follow through. Biden had not spoken to Vladimir Putin, I mean, in almost 3 years when he left office. And you need to have those difficult conversations and find a way to forge peace negotiations, peace deals, in order to end that war. Meanwhile, as Ryan Grimm very effectively argued last year, Democrats suffered in the election because they had the optics of caring more about foreign wars than Americans here at home.
People see America first. They read it as xenophobic and anti-immigrant. But Trump's supporters scan it as a promise not to waste money on wars and nation building while our own country crumbles. But the critique in that slogan, and expressed by that Charlemagne caller, makes an emotional link between issues that are treated as disparate and distinct by political operatives. The jarring price swings at the grocery store and at the pump, combined with the out-of-control wars and the surge of migrants at the border, combined to produce a visceral sense that our leaders in Washington were sacrificing the needs of regular people here in the United States. People's sense that the economy was being handled poorly by Biden was colored by the chaos overseas, and his rapt attention to Ukraine and Israel left little room for confidence that he cared what was going on back here. By pretending that the U.S. could do it all, but then only delivering on the foreign wars, Democrats set up ordinary people to view it as a zero-sum competition.
I think that statement from Ryan Grimm is so on point, and I do think that this hurt Democrats in this past election cycle. Look, say what you will about Donald Trump, and obviously we've been critical of him. Obviously I have my problems with him, but he tends to understand where the hearts and minds of his voters are far better than the Democrats do when it comes to their own voters. And they need to wake up to that fact, because if they don't, they're going to keep losing elections. But nonetheless, just checking in on this devastating war in Ukraine, I mean, thousands of people have been killed as a result of this war. It needs to end. I don't care if it's the Democrats who succeed in ending it or the Republicans who succeed in ending it. It needs to end. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in December said that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in action, and an additional 370,000 have been wounded. Zelensky also said Ukraine estimated that 198,000 Russian soldiers have been killed and more than 550,000 have been wounded. Now, circling back to Donald Trump's threat to Vladimir Putin, which came in the form of additional tariffs and sanctions, as I mentioned earlier, yes, it is true that Biden has implemented sanctions against Russia, and they haven't worked. Russia has continued on with this war in Ukraine with no end in sight. However, there is one area in which Trump seems to be threatening Putin where Biden was kind of unwilling to do so. So this might make the difference. I don't know for sure, but here's what it's about. So the Trump administration seems more willing to go after Russia's energy sector, which the Biden administration also did to some extent, but in a very limited manner. During the confirmation hearing to be Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent last week told Congress that he would be 100% on board for taking sanctions up, especially on the Russian oil majors, to levels that would bring the Russian Federation to the table. Now, while Russia has thus far been able to basically circumvent Western sanctions, Business Insider reports that Russia's economy is in fact starting to slow, with inflation rising rapidly in the country. Only time will tell whether Trump will both make good on these threats and if these economic threats move the needle in regard to where Vladimir Putin stands on the continuation of this war in Ukraine. So we'll see if this is a tactic that works, but I'm glad that Trump at least realizes that ending a war doesn't happen in 24 hours. It's a complicated situation, and you do need both parties to agree to it. And I'm also happy that he's realized that Putin is a lot more difficult to work with than Zelensky is on this matter. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll definitely follow the story. This war absolutely needs to end, and I hope it does.
learn about crypto and get rewarded as you learn with Coinbase Learning Rewards. We've paid out over $100 million in crypto.
The leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were free following their pardons yesterday. At the time back in 2021, you urged them to stand back and stand by. Is there now a place for them in the political conversation?
Well, we have to say they've been hit in the bar, and I thought their sentences were ridiculous and excessive.
We'll have to see. Then Ontario spoke to Alex Jones and told him, quote, "Our people